Hello and welcome to another video review, and today we're reviewing my most anticipated game of this year, and we already got it in January. It feels like kind of a late Christmas present at this point, and that is of course the Resident Evil 2 Remake. Now, a couple things I want to say at the beginning of this review before we dive into the game itself. I am not going to have any spoilers in this review whatsoever. I'm also only going to use footage from the police station area and the very beginning of the game. I'm not going to do anything past that point. I might talk about different things, like for example, Mr. X shows up later in the game. However, to keep everything completely spoiler free, no footage in this video review is going to be after the police station segment of the game. So anyways, without further ado, here is my review of Resident Evil 2.
Hey, we should probably get you to a hospital.
Forget about me. I can take care of myself.
No, don't be ridiculous. You're gonna need some help.
Listen, Claire. Save yourself. So you can see your brother again. Now, you'll probably need this.
No, I'm not taking that. You're gonna...
And be careful. If you see one of those things, no matter who they were, you can't hesitate. Take them out if you can. Or you run.
I don't think I've been more anticipated for a game in recent memory than the remake of Resident Evil 2. Announced in 2015, up until E3 2018, it seemed as if Capcom had long abandoned this project. With the release of Resident Evil 7 in January 2017, I felt as if Capcom had all but forgotten about their small 2015 announcement. Sure, you'd hear rumblings here and there about it, rumors of this change or that change, but nothing else was said. Hell, one of the reasons I started this channel in the beginning was because I wanted to cover this remake because of my sheer hope that it would be something special for the fans of this long-running franchise. And while Resident Evil 7 did hit in 2017, I was worried. While not an outright bad game, Resident Evil 7 is a game that I honestly put lower on my list of best Resident Evil games. Sure, it's a return to survival horror, and in that regard, it's a great game. But it just doesn't feel like a great Resident Evil game to me. Gone are the things I care about in this franchise. The characters, the monsters, tank controls, which is something that's debatable for everyone as that's been absent from this franchise for quite some time. And instead, everything was replaced with a first-person perspective, obviously to allow for VR support, and a lack of enemy types that mattered. There's just no zombies in this game at all. While overall I enjoyed the return to the survival horror roots of this franchise, other than the last half hour, you could literally call this game anything else and it would have been a generic horror title. Sticking a mainstay Resident Evil character in for a brief cameo at the end, I'm not going to spoil who that is here, isn't a band-aid to just say, hey, look at us, we made a Resident Evil game, this is it, if the other 95% of your game just doesn't have the right feel or look. Needless to say, the game bummed me and gave me strong doubt that I'd ever see an actual remake of Resident Evil 2. And since the sales were quite strong of Resident Evil 7, it seemed obvious that Capcom would want to continue this first-person perspective on the series. But then something happened. We got a glorious trailer at E3 2018 that reintroduced us to Resident Evil 2. Gone was the first-person perspective, and now the camera had been fixed in a more Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 approach. The game's graphics were downright jaw-dropping, and the horror, the actual horror, was there. It was bloody, it was gruesome, and it was everything that I had hoped this game would be. It was a long 8-month wait, but finally, the game is here. I've played it, I've beaten it, and let's have a discussion about it. Resident Evil 2 Remake does for the original Resident Evil 2 what the GameCube remake of Resident Evil did for the original PlayStation release. Smart changes have been made to assure that this is a survival horror game first and not an action-based release, such as the 4 through 6 era of games. Gone are any hints of QuickTime events from that era, which is one of the first things that players were worried about. If a zombie attacks you, you're gonna take damage. Did you pick up a defensive item? Cool, you can use that. This isn't a standard remaster, but a straight-up remake of a 21-year-old game. Capcom is treating this as a complete, almost reimagining of the events of the game we all loved back in 1998. Before we continue, I need to be completely transparent about my long history with this franchise. As many of you guys know here, the GameCube remake, now the 2015 remaster, is my overall favorite video game of all time. I love that game. I adore that game. But my history of Resident Evil 2 isn't as abundant. Yes, I played through the game several times over the years, with the PS1 original release, followed by the Nintendo 64 port, and then finally the GameCube port of the game. But that's about it. The last time I ran through this game was probably 4 or 5 years ago. It's not one that I've played over and over again, and while I do have fond memories of the game, for me it still pales in comparison to the GameCube remake. To me, that is the perfect game. Well, now that we've got that out of the way, good. The game allows you to start as either Claire or Leon. Personally, I've never been a huge fan of Leon. I know that's going to get a lot of hate here. I feel that he's a character that's been overused throughout the series. Jill's always going to be my favorite Resident Evil character, so I ran through the first run of this game as Claire. From the opening all the way till you make it to the police station, hell, all the way to the end of the game, the level of love and care that went into this remake is second to none. I love that things like the item box have returned, and I'm anxious to start a hardcore run of the game with both characters, as that incorporates things such as finding ink ribbons to save, and even more reduced ammo. And the graphics. I think we should just take a moment here to pause and appreciate them. Resident Evil 2 at this time is graphically the best looking game that I have played to date. With the re-engine in full force here that was introduced in Resident Evil 7, allowing for photorealistic graphics, it is completely jaw-dropping at times. But putting aside the graphics, how does the 2019 Resident Evil 2 play? Honestly, it plays like a dream. Look man, I'm a purist, and while I would have loved to see the return to tank controls or a fixed camera angle here, I think Capcom's decision to move everything to a third-person over-the-shoulder camera style was the best choice. Sure, tank controls and a fixed camera perspective would please hardcore fans such as myself, but in 2019, I don't really see casual fans being able to grasp those concepts. Mixing the controls, which all feel really good, with the game's seemingly locked 60 frames per second frame rate, I played the game on Xbox One X, the game runs like a dream too. In fact, only a few sections did I notice any sort of slowdown. The return of 7's quick inventory management is also a nice rollover to this game. However, the game isn't without a few flaws. For starters, while I do appreciate the challenge, zombies take more bullets than they should here. Look, I've played a lot of Resident Evil over the years, but here I feel like they are just straight up bullet sponges. I'm not asking for an immediate headshot to kill a zombie, the game would be way too easy if that was possible, but 2 to 3 headshots should do the job. The fact that I have to shoot over and over and over and over again is quite ridiculous at times. The second gripe I have is the added content that wasn't in the original game. There's a short sequence here, and this is a spoiler, involving Sherry Birkin at an orphanage that literally adds nothing to this story whatsoever. It just came off as a way to pad the game's overall runtime. It's short, maybe 15 minutes, but it felt out of place and kind of spoiled the pace of the game just a tad. Honestly, I'm not a problem with them adding content to a 21-year-old game, but this just felt incredibly out of place, and I really just didn't care for this portion of the game. Finally, my only other major gripe with the game is the overly easy puzzles. Look man, there should be some challenge, but when you literally give me a notebook at the beginning of the game that shows me the solution to arguably the most complex puzzle in the game, which is the statue puzzle, it's kind of weak and a moot point to have it in the game. I mean, this notebook literally shows you exactly how to do this puzzle. It's kind of a bummer. I will admit that later on in the game there's a decent chess puzzle involving circuitry, but most of the puzzles in this game feel as they're incredibly dumbed down. However, that's really it for my gripes, honestly. All in all, it took me about 7 hours to run through my first playthrough with Claire, and this was me taking my time and just scouring over every little corner in this game. It took me about half of that time playing through the game as Leon, and I'm sure that these times are only going to improve my follow-up runs of the game. I mean, that's exactly what original Resident Evil was to me, was running through the game and trying to beat the game later on after you've, experienced the story and everything. Just playing through the game and trying to get the best time possible. The last major thing I want to touch on here is Mr. X, who I feel is perfectly executed, see what I did there, in this game. Mr. X is the tyrant that shows up and chases you throughout the police station through a portion of the game. You can literally hear his thunderous footsteps everywhere you go. Mr. X was a massive idea in the original Resident Evil 2 in 1998, and the major idea of him is what transferred over to Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. And then other popular horror titles of the era picked up on this idea of being chased as well. Haunting Ground comes to mind. I found that he was a shorter part of the game, and I wish he would have stayed around just a little bit longer. But his use here is incredibly accurate to the original PlayStation game. You can obviously tell that his design hits at the long-rumored Resident Evil 3 remake that is supposedly in development right now as well. Well, folks, that's it. That's Resident Evil 2 for you. Capcom has done the impossible, and they've remade one of the greatest games of all time, and arguably they've made it better with a more modern feel to it. It's an incredibly worthy successor to the legacy that Resident Evil 2 set 21 years later. It's an early, easy contender for my 2019 Game of the Year, and I know we're already in January, but it's easily the #1 game on my list thus far. I'm giving Resident Evil 2, the 2019 remake, an A+. And like I said in my review, while I don't think it's a perfect game, I don't think any game is perfect, I loved every minute of this remake, and I'm still playing the game. I still have other runs to do. You know, there's so many more things I want to do with this game. Anyways, guys, as always, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And anyways, until next time.